moved to New York in the late 90s. I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had lived there all my life, and just being in the band, I got the chance to travel. I always just loved the energy of New York, and I always felt very at home here, even though there's this whole stereotype about West Coast versus East Coast, and if you're a West Coast person, the last place you'd ever want to live is New York City. But it was the strangest thing. I just felt so comfortable. I started visiting more and more in the 90s, and by the mid-90s I had decided I need to be here. One partial reason for that, my family is from New York originally. So even though I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area, they're both academics. They were on faculty at UC Berkeley. My mother's from Washington Heights. My father's from Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. And I think New York was always there. From the day I moved to New York, people were asking me directions on the street. So I just fit right in, and I haven't left since, and have no plans to do so. Well, people often talk about the pace of life on the East Coast versus West Coast, especially New York. I think that there's a certain honesty as well. Some might say that there's a sense of politeness on the West Coast. That's maybe true, but I prefer the directness. I don't consider it rude or anything. Like I would much rather somebody just be honest and smile if they don't feel like smiling. And there's just a lot more of that in New York. And I think also just the fact that you have other big cities close by. You're right next to New Jersey, which has a lot of big cities, but of course Pennsylvania is right there. So Philadelphia is only a couple hours away. That's another major city. DC, which is another very influential city, that's only 4 hours away. It just feels very connected to the world. And also, a trip overseas doesn't take much longer than flying to the West Coast. So it really just feels central, and there's a certain cosmopolitan quality here. My days are very okay, so somebody wants to. You can come. You just have to make up your mind. Anyway, that's Gizmo. Gizmo is a rescue cat that some friends of ours found on the street, and I just I never had a cat of my own before, and I just volunteered to look after this cat for a few days until we could find somebody to take her, and she never left. She kind of adopted me. Talking about a typical day is a bit of a challenge, because no day for me is typical. It really depends on what's going on. I have a whole world of music that I do, besides Testament. It depends on what gig I have, or maybe a rehearsal. Outside of Testament, the one I'm probably most associated with is my trio, the Alex Morris Trio. Depending on if we have a show or a tour coming up, we are rehearsing, getting together to write. There's a local place in Brooklyn that I rehearse. There's also a Manhattan rehearsal spot, and there's some other artists I work with that rehearse there. If I have written work to do, say I'm working on a blog or music instruction, which I do. I'm actually working on a music instruction project right now, so I'll often go to a local coffee spot, kind of perch myself in a corner and drink lots of coffee and work on my laptop. And then, one thing about being in New York is there are often great shows. And a lot of shows come through here, and sometimes friends of mine. Depending on who's playing and how much energy I have, I might go catch a show. Living in New York is very different than being on the West Coast, where you kind of need a car on the West Coast. In New York, it's actually easier not to have a car. For just day-to-day travel, the subway system pretty much goes everywhere you need it to go. There's always cabs, and now you have ride apps. Yeah, that's just part of your daily routine, is to take public transportation, and I enjoy it. Well, the photography thing started fairly recently. The last thing I need is more stuff to do. But my friend Randy from Lamb of God, he noticed some of my regular pictures and told me, you need to be shooting with a real camera. So he loaned me one of his Leicas, and I was hooked. When we were on tour together on the Slayer tour, I had it for like the last couple weeks of the tour, and then I had to give it back. It's not a cheap camera, but I was hooked. It really got me into it. There's always things to photograph in New York. So I try to make it a habit to have the camera with me. I'm away hundreds of days of the year. Like I counted it was probably more than 200 days the last couple of years, and all over the world. We just got back from Kathmandu in Nepal. So I realized, I'm going to these places that not everybody gets to go every day. What a cool thing to document. So I mainly, with photography, I think travel photography is my main focus, pun not intended. But also, yes, in New York, you're constantly inspired to just reach for the camera and take a photo. I like seasons. I like the fact that the temperature changes. It can come with challenges, especially on the very cold days of winter can be a challenge. But then again, it builds character, and you feel like everybody's in it together. We're suffering, but you're not suffering alone. Everybody is suffering. You know what? When the bad weather passes and it starts getting warm again in the spring, it's incredible. It's just wonderful. You feel it very strongly. Whereas on the West Coast, you just you can have a nice day, and then the next day it's the same day, and then the same thing, and there's just so many nice days. They stop feeling like nice days. I like that. I like the change. I like to be reminded that time is passing. Yeah, as far as food, oh my God, it's like, where to begin? There's tons of great ethnic food. There's so many like great restaurants, sometimes from chefs you've heard of, and it can be overwhelming. There's too much. There's too much in New York. There's too much to try. But when I have friends visit, that's always a good excuse to indulge and go someplace that I've heard about and try some new restaurants. As far as pizza is concerned, like there are some great spots in the Bay Area. They advertise these as New York pizza, and then when you actually have like top New York pizza, you get it. That's a whole other thing. And nobody really does New York pizza like it is in New York. I think I'm just naturally a city person. When I'm out in nature, if I find myself in nature, for example, there are these summer festivals that it seems like there are more and more every year, and it's great. Testament does these festivals, and they're always in these really nice locations, often very kind of remote. So when I find myself out in nature, I'm very appreciative, and I always tell myself, I should do this more. Yeah, you just kind of get dialed in with this community out here, and it's great.
It's another day in New York City.